They say everything happens for a reason. I used to believe that with my whole heart. It was stitched into every prayer I ever whispered, every hymn I ever sang. But that was before I met Daniel Pierce, before the certainty of my faith cracked in the softest way, a conversation over coffee, a laugh in a quiet hallway, a look that made me forget what side of the line I stood on. And now, I find myself wondering, if God orchestrates everything, did he mean for me to meet someone who doesn't believe in him? I first saw him at a university panel on ethics and modern science. I wasn't even supposed to be there because Lily, my best friend, said I needed to get out of the cathedral and back into the world. Daniel was one of the speakers. His name was unfamiliar, but his presence, unmistakable. He spoke calmly, like someone who'd spent years peeling away certainty and found peace in not knowing. We can do good without believing in God, just as we can believe in God and still do terrible things. I felt my jaw tighten. I wasn't offended, not exactly, but I could feel something in me coil, like instinct trying to shield what I held sacred. After the panel, they opened the floor for questions. My hand shot up. I believe in God, I said, standing among professors and philosophers. Not because it's convenient, but because it's the only thing that's ever made sense when nothing else did. Daniel didn't argue. He just smiled, nodded, and said, "That's fair. But I've learned to live with the mystery." I wanted to dismiss him. I couldn't. There was something in the way he looked at people. Not with judgment, not with pity, with curiosity. Later, outside the hall, he approached me. "You asked the most honest question in the room." I blinked. "I didn't ask a question." "Exactly." He offered to buy me coffee. I said no twice. The third time, I said yes. We met the next Saturday. Neutral ground, a small cafe near the university library. I wore my mother's crucifix, not out of defiance, just to remind myself of who I was. He noticed it immediately. "Catholic?" I replied, stirring my tea. "I figured. You've got that serene but deadly look." I laughed. "We call it grace." He smiled again, but this time his eyes softened. "Do you ever get tired of believing?" I thought for a long time before answering. "No, I get tired of doubting." That quieted him. We talked for 2 hours about childhood, about grief, about silence in prayer. He told me he stopped believing after his father died of cancer when Daniel was 10. People said God had a plan, but I never got the memo. He didn't sound bitter, just unfinished. When I asked what he believed in now, he said, love, logic, loyalty. In that order. I didn't plan to see him again. But I did. Once became twice, twice became 5 times. None of it was romantic, not in the traditional sense. We weren't flirting, we were unfolding. He never tried to shake my faith, I never tried to convert him. And still, each conversation felt like something sacred being touched. I stopped telling Lily about him after the 3rd coffee. She raised one eyebrow too many. "You sure he's not trying to get into your, theology?" I rolled my eyes. He doesn't even know my last name. But he did. And he'd started calling me Claire like it meant something. Like he was testing the name with every syllable. The first time he saw my rosary on the dashboard of my car, he ran his finger over it gently. I used to think those were just superstition. And now? I asked. He shrugged. Now I think they're hope in physical form. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, whispering prayers I hadn't needed in months. Not because I was falling away, but because I was falling in. The next Sunday, at Mass, I couldn't focus. Father Flynn's homily blurred into background noise. Every passage about temptation or clarity felt like a spotlight. After service, I approached Father. "I met someone," I said. He smiled like he already knew. "Does he believe?" he asked. I hesitated. "In kindness, in science, not in God." Father Flynn nodded slowly. "Be careful, Claire. Your heart is generous, but faith isn't just a feeling, it's a direction." I didn't respond because part of me already knew I wasn't just walking with Daniel. I was drifting. One afternoon, we sat on a bench outside a bookstore. He handed me a used copy of a book I once mentioned in passing, something obscure, something I hadn't even remembered mentioning. He said, "I listen." As I stared at the worn cover, "I noticed," I whispered. The sunlight hit his face at just the right angle, and for a second, I imagined what it might feel like to come home to him. It felt warm. It felt dangerous. One evening, he asked, "What scares you most about this?" "This?" I asked. "Us." I couldn't answer. Because I wasn't scared of him. I was scared that God was watching, and I wasn't sure he approved. That night, I kneeled beside my bed as I always did, and whispered the Lord's Prayer. But when I reached, "Thy will be done," my voice cracked. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I wanted what he wanted. If this story stirs something in you, questions, memories, or quiet longings, stay with me. This journey doesn't promise answers, but it may echo the questions you carry too. Share this story with someone who has ever loved across a line.
I didn't mean to fall for him. It started with coffee. After that evening at the symposium, Daniel emailed me, just a line. "You challenged me more than anyone has in a long time. Want to grab coffee and finish our debate?" I stared at the message for days before replying, and when I did, it wasn't with scripture or another argument. It was just, "Sure," but no interrupting me this time. We met on a Wednesday afternoon. The cafe was quiet, its windows fogged by the February chill. He was already there when I arrived, reading from a worn paperback, a tea, of all things, at his side. Not coffee, tea. He raised an eyebrow as I walked in, then stood. "Claire." Like my name was something important. That day, we didn't debate, not really. We talked about small things, books, siblings, the difference between Northern and Southern Irish accents. I learned he was raised by a single mom, that he loved puzzles as a child, that he stopped believing in God when he was 14, the year his sister was hospitalized, and the prayers never helped. He said quietly, "You don't really forget the moment you stop believing. It's like leaving a house you thought was home." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. Just sipped my coffee, fingers curled around the cup like it could warm the doubts stirring inside me. I should have walked away, but instead I met him again and again, until it became a rhythm. Tuesdays at the park, Fridays at that same little cafe, Sundays, well, never Sundays. He never asked me to skip Mass, but I could feel the question hanging in the air every time I told him, "I'll meet you after church." Still, he listened when I talked about my faith. Really listened. Never rolled his eyes, never called it superstition. Once when I described what it felt like to light a candle for someone, how the flame carried your hope upward, he just nodded and said, "That's beautiful." It made me angry almost. I didn't want him to respect my faith. I wanted him to share it, or at least understand the ache it gave me. Because it was growing, that ache, not just between us, but inside me. He made me feel seen, not just for the girl I was at the altar or the woman in a pew, but the full, messy, doubting human in between. With Daniel, I could talk about the nights I lay awake wondering if God heard me, about the time I screamed at the sky when David died, and then immediately felt guilty. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened, like that was enough. But there were things I didn't say. I didn't tell my mother about him. Didn't tell Lily, not right away. I certainly didn't tell Father Flynn. Every time I met Daniel, I told myself, just one more time, just one more walk, just one more conversation. But those one mores started to add up, until he became a chapter of my life I couldn't close. One night, after dinner at a small Italian place where we shared tiramisu and laughter, he walked me home, stood outside my apartment with his hands in his coat pockets, and asked, "Do you ever think we're crazy for doing this?" I looked up. Doing what? This. You and me. It doesn't make sense. You're a believer, I'm not. You pray, I debate. We probably disagree on every existential question out there. I smiled. But we agree on dessert. He chuckled, then turned serious. Claire, I don't want to pretend this isn't complicated, but when I'm with you, I forget why it should matter. My heart hurt, in the best and worst way. I wanted to tell him I felt the same. Instead, I said, "Good night, Daniel." He didn't kiss me, not that night. But the next week, he did. Softly, hesitantly, like he was asking a question with his lips. And I answered. With that kiss, I crossed a line. Not because of some rule, not even because I was Catholic, but because I had been pretending this wasn't real, that we weren't real. And now I knew better. The next morning, I lit a candle at church and didn't say a word, not even a prayer. A week later, I told Lily. We were having brunch at her place, her toddler throwing Cheerios across the kitchen, and Lily juggling coffee and chaos like the pro she was. "I'm seeing someone," I said, trying to sound casual. She raised an eyebrow. "And by someone, you mean the man you've been texting under the table for the last month?" I laughed. "Is it that obvious?" She said. "Claire, you haven't looked at your eggs once. Spill." So I did. I told her about Daniel, about the symposium, about the way he listened, the way he didn't believe. She didn't interrupt until the end. Then she said, "Well, damn." I waited. She sipped her coffee. "Do I think your mom will flip? Yes. Do I think Father Flynn will lose sleep? Also yes. But do I think you're doing something terrible? No." I blinked. "You don't?" She shrugged. "You're not marrying the guy. You're exploring, feeling. And even if you were, maybe that's not the end of the world. But he doesn't believe in God. And I don't know if I can love someone who doesn't share my core values." She looked at me, really looked. "Claire, you're allowed to ask hard questions, even about your faith, even about love. That doesn't make you a bad Catholic, it makes you human." I didn't cry, but I wanted to, because that was the first time someone gave me permission to be confused. A few days later, I went to confession, not because I'd done something terrible, but because I needed a space where I could say, "I don't know what I'm doing." Father Flynn listened, as always. He didn't gasp or scold or shake his head. He just sat quietly in the booth, a man who had heard hundreds of confessions before and would hear thousands after. And then he said, "Sometimes the hardest part of faith is when it collides with love." I was surprised. "You mean "It's not wrong to care for someone like Daniel?" He said, "It's not wrong to care, but it might be dangerous to build your life on ground that doesn't share your foundation." I thought about that all the way home. That night, Daniel texted me, "I miss you. Can I see you tomorrow?" I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed, "Yes," even though I knew this story had no simple ending.
I remember the morning I almost didn't go to Mass. I was halfway through getting dressed, blouse buttoned unevenly, hair only half dried, when I looked in the mirror and asked myself, why are you going? Not because I didn't believe, but because I was afraid someone would see the truth written across my face, like lipstick smudged or mascara running. I had fallen for a man who didn't believe in God, and I was hiding it like a secret sin. In the pew, I couldn't concentrate. The familiar rhythms of the liturgy washed over me, but nothing sank in. When Father Flynn raised the Eucharist and whispered, "This is my body," I lowered my eyes. I didn't take communion. After Mass, I stood by the statue of Mary outside, her hands open, face tilted upward, like she was trying to listen. For the first time since I was a girl, I didn't know what to say to her. That same day, I called Lily. "I think I need to talk to Father Flynn," I said. She hesitated. "You sure?" "No. But you'll feel worse if you don't?" "Yes." She sighed. "Then do it. But for the love of all things holy, don't confess like you killed someone." That made me laugh. For a moment, anyway. Father Flynn's office always smelled like old books and lemon polish. I had been there countless times before, when I was preparing for confirmation, when David died, when I needed quiet counsel after a bad breakup. But this time felt different. He looked up from his desk as I entered and smiled gently. "Claire, sit, please." I did, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "I've done something," I said, voice trembling. "Have you now?" He said with a calm that was somehow more unnerving than if he'd sounded shocked. "I've been seeing someone, a man." He nodded, waiting. He's not Catholic. He's not even Christian. He doesn't believe in God at all." Now Father Flynn leaned back, steepling his fingers. "And does he know your faith matters to you?" "Yes," I said immediately. "He respects it." "And you?" I blinked. "What do you mean? Do you still believe as much as you did before you met him?" That question hit me like a pebble to glass. Did I? I believed in God, still lit candles, still prayed, though less than I used to. I still whispered the Our Father before big decisions, but something had shifted. "Maybe," I said. "I believe, but differently now. Not less, just changed." "Yes." He nodded. Faith isn't meant to be untouched. It grows when tested. But love with someone who does not share your belief, is not just a test of faith, it's a test of endurance. I exhaled, relieved and disappointed all at once. "I thought you'd be angrier," I admitted. "I'm not angry, but I am cautious. Tell me, what do you love about him?" I was silent for a moment. "He's kind. He listens. He doesn't fake agreement just to keep me happy. He makes me laugh. And he makes me think." "And what does he believe in?" "People, honesty, doing the right thing even when no one's watching." Father Flynn raised an eyebrow. "Those sound like Christian values." I smiled a little. "I know. That's what makes this so hard." He stood, walked over to the window, and looked out at the garden where lilies were beginning to bloom. Then he turned back to me. "Claire,
I've known you your whole life. I know you don't take faith lightly. So I won't tell you what to do, but I'll say this. Love is more than compatibility. It's shared ground, shared compass. He paused. And if your compass always points to God and his doesn't, how long can you walk together before one of you turns? I left his office with that question burning in my chest. That night, I told Daniel I'd spoken to my priest. His expression shifted, tightened, almost imperceptibly. What did he say? He asked, voice calm. That we might not be walking the same direction. He nodded. Do you think that's true? I looked at him, at the man that made me feel more alive than I'd felt in years, and I didn't know what to say. So I said the truth. I don't know. He didn't push, just took my hand and said, whatever you need to figure out, I'll give you space to do it. No anger, no guilt, just kindness. And that made it worse, because part of me had hoped he would fight. The next day, I talked to my mother. That was a mistake. I'm seeing someone, I said over lunch. She didn't even look up from her soup. From church? I hesitated. No. Now she looked. And where did you meet this man? At an academic event. He teaches philosophy. She raised an eyebrow. At a Catholic college? I laughed, nervous. No, secular. Her spoon clinked against the bowl. Claire, what are you doing? I like him, Mom. You like a man who doesn't believe in God? People change. Hearts change. God doesn't change, she said coldly. The rest of the meal was quiet. I left with my stomach in knots. Later that week, Lily and I sat on a park bench watching her son chase ducks. She's never going to accept it, I said. She doesn't have to. You do. I keep thinking about what Father Flynn said about walking in different directions. Well, she said, are you? I don't know. Okay, let me ask it another way. When you picture your future, is Daniel in it? At Christmas? At baptisms? Sitting beside you in church? I imagined it. Daniel holding my hand at Mass, not kneeling but present, not singing but silent in respect, not crossing himself but watching as I did. Yes, I said finally. He's there. Even if he doesn't believe, he's there. Then maybe that's enough, Lily said softly. Maybe love doesn't need to be perfect, just present. One evening, Daniel asked if I wanted to spend the weekend out with him, out of town. Just the two of us. A small Airbnb in the mountains. It would have been the first time. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked, would you ever come to church with me? He blinked. Like, for a service? I nodded. He hesitated. Would you want me to? I'd want you there, not for the prayers, just for me. He was quiet a long time, then said, if it matters to you, yes, I'd come. My heart swelled, and then it broke a little, because I realized I could ask him to come to church, but I could never ask him to believe, and maybe that was the line.
I found the letter tucked into the worn, leather-bound copy of the Brothers Karamazov that Daniel borrowed from me months ago. It had been sitting on my bookshelf, untouched since he returned it. I'd almost given it away in one of my Sunday decluttering sprees. But something, I don't know what, kept me from letting it go. That morning, I was looking for anything to distract myself from the ache inside my chest. I wasn't ready to face another homily about trust and obedience. I skipped church and wandered instead, barefoot around my apartment, picking things up and putting them down, trying to feel something,
When I pulled that book off the shelf, it opened right to the middle, and there it was. Cream-colored paper, folded neatly in half, my name written in the middle, Claire. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it for a while, held it like something fragile, like it might burn me if I got too close. Eventually, I sat down, curled up on the couch, and read. The letter. Claire, I know I don't have the right to ask you to read this, but I also know you, and I hope that you'll let your heart get in the way, like you always do. I've been writing and rewriting these pages for weeks. There's no good way to say what I want to say, but I'm tired of silence. I'm tired of pretending this isn't real. I miss you. But this letter isn't just about that. You once asked me if I ever believed in God. I gave you some half-baked answer about the universe and evolution and logic. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The truth is, I stopped believing when I was 12. My sister Emily had a seizure in the bathtub. My mom found her too late. I watched her coffin roll down the aisle of our old church, and I remember thinking, if there's a God, he's got a cruel way of showing up. Everyone kept saying, she's in a better place, this is God's plan, everything happens for a reason. But I couldn't find a reason. I still can't. So I decided I'd rather believe in people than in silence. But then I met you. You made faith look warm, not the sharp-edged, judgmental thing I'd grown up with. You prayed like it was breathing, like it helped you hold the world in place. I envied that. I still do. I don't want you to change for me, Claire. I don't want to rip you from the thing that holds you together. But I need you to understand that just because I don't believe in the same things doesn't mean I don't believe in you. You, your compassion, your stubborn hope, your unwillingness to give up on the world, you are the closest thing to holy I've ever seen. I don't know where this ends. I don't know if you can keep loving someone who doesn't see the world the way you do. But I wanted you to know where I stand. No hiding, no pretending. I love you. Daniel. I read it once, then again, and again. At some point, I noticed I was crying. Not the kind that storms in, wild and heavy. These were soft tears, silent ones, like a river running under ice. There was something about the way he wrote, how he peeled himself open, not to convince me, not to manipulate, but just to be known. And I hated that I loved him even more for it. That evening, I found myself at the foot of my bed, rosary beads tangled in my fingers. I hadn't prayed in weeks, not really, not with my whole heart, but something inside me stirred again, like an ember under ashes. God, what am I supposed to do? The silence didn't answer me, but I stayed kneeling, just breathing. The next day, I called Lily. I didn't plan on telling her about the letter, but she has that way of pulling the truth out of me without trying. Okay, she said slowly, after I finished. That's a lot. I expected her to launch into some sarcastic commentary, something about me needing therapy or a getaway. Instead, she surprised me. You know, she said, I used to think love was supposed to fix us. That if it was real, it would line everything up, make all the ugly stuff disappear. She paused. But maybe love's more like sitting in the mess with someone and saying, yeah, I don't get it either, but I'm not leaving. I sighed. I wish he believed. I wish I didn't care so much that he doesn't. Yeah, that's the hard part. I brought the letter to Father Flynn. It felt like betrayal somehow. Like opening a wound and asking someone to grate it. He read it without speaking, then folded the pages carefully and handed them back to me. You love him, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, eyes burning. And you love God. Another nod. A tear slipped free. Then you're standing in the place where love and obedience clash. It's a holy place, Claire, but also a painful one. I don't want to lose either. Most people don't. He leaned back in his chair, looking at the stained glass window beside his desk. The church teaches that faith is a gift.
You can't force someone to unwrap it, but you can hold the door open. You can live your faith in a way that shows beauty instead of fear. And what if it's not enough? He looked at me then, really looked. Then you'll have lived in love, and that, my child, is never wasted. That night, I wrote Daniel back. I didn't know what I was going to say, I just let the words come. Daniel, I read your letter so many times, I'm surprised the ink hasn't faded. Thank you for not pretending. Thank you for telling me the truth, even the hard, messy parts. I wish I could promise that everything will work out, that my heart isn't torn in two, that loving you has made my faith feel both deeper and more fragile than ever before. But here's what I do know. You matter to me. Your story matters. Your pain matters. And your love, it's not less because it doesn't come with scripture. I'm scared. I'm confused. But I'm not walking away. Not yet. Claire. I didn't send it. Not right away. I folded it, placed it next to his letter, and left it there. Maybe someday I'd give it to him. Maybe I wouldn't have to. Maybe I'd read it out loud, face to face, and let the words tremble between us. For now, I just needed to keep breathing, and praying, and hoping.
I once read that every woman has two lives, the one she lives and the one she could have lived if she had taken a different path. I never thought I'd stand in the middle of mine, one foot trembling on each. It happened on a Thursday. I was setting the table for dinner, simple, grilled chicken, steamed broccoli, rice, when my mother knocked. She never knocks. She just comes in, calling out Claire like she owns the place. But this knock was different, soft, hesitant, almost polite. I opened the door, dish towels still in my hand. She held a manila envelope, her eyes unreadable. May I come in? That was the second clue. I nodded, stepping aside. She didn't look at the table, or the flowers Daniel had brought me 3 days before, or the wine glasses I'd foolishly laid out, assuming it would just be a quiet dinner for two. She sat, quietly, laid the envelope down on the table like it contained something alive and dangerous. Then she said 4 words that changed everything. I met your friend. I didn't have to ask who. Apparently, she'd stopped by my office unannounced and seen me walking out to lunch with Daniel, laughing, holding his hand like I wasn't the daughter of Elizabeth Walsh. He opened the car door for you. He touched your back like a man touches a woman he loves. My mouth dried. I'm not here to fight, Claire. I just want to understand how my daughter, my Catholic daughter, has fallen in love with a man who doesn't believe in God. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to defend Daniel, to say that he did believe in kindness, in truth, in responsibility, that he lit candles even though he didn't pray, that he said, I hope instead of I pray, but somehow it meant the same thing when it came from him. But I didn't. Instead, I whispered, it just happened. My mother leaned back like I'd slapped her. Nothing just happens, Claire. You chose this. You've been choosing it for months. And she was right. I had been choosing it. In silence, in small ways, with every coffee date, every walk in the park, every morning I woke up smiling because he was part of my world. What followed wasn't a fight. It was worse. Disappointment. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just stood, picked up her envelope, which turned out to contain a brochure for a marriage prep retreat, and said, you know what's right. You were raised better than this. Then she left. I sat down. The chicken was getting cold, the wine sweating in its glass, and I felt like a fraud, both to Daniel and to my faith. When he arrived 20 minutes later, he kissed my cheek, noticed my face, and asked, is everything okay? I nodded, lied. Yeah, just tired. But over dinner, I couldn't stop staring at his hands. Those hands that always held mine with gentleness. The ones that had built a bookshelf for me just because I'd mentioned I needed one. I imagined them folded in prayer, and I couldn't. I wondered what our wedding would look like. Would my mother even attend? Would I be the only one crossing herself during the ceremony? Would Daniel stand by respectfully? Or would he feel like an outsider on the most important day of my life? These questions looped in my head like a broken hymn. And then, 3 days later, Daniel asked me the question I wasn't ready for. It was a Sunday afternoon. We were sitting on a bench near the lake, our usual spot. Ducks were waddling around, children playing in the distance. The sky was bluer than I'd ever seen it. He held my hand, squeezed it, then said, "Claire, I've been thinking. I want to build something with you. A life, a home. I want us to stop sneaking, hiding. I don't care if we don't share the same beliefs. I believe in you. Isn't that enough?" He reached into his pocket, no box, just a small silver ring in his palm. My breath caught. He didn't kneel. He just looked at me, eyes steady, no pressure, waiting. And I broke. I cried in front of the ducks, the children, God, and the world. I cried for everything I wanted, everything I feared, and everything I couldn't reconcile. He wrapped me in his arms. "You don't have to answer now," he whispered. "Just think about it." I did more than think. That night, I visited Father Flynn. He was in his garden, trimming roses. I'd always loved that about him, that he got dirt on his hands just like anyone else. He saw my face and said nothing, just handed me a pair of gloves and pointed to the weeds. I got to work. When we finished, we sat on his old wooden bench, silence thick between us. I'm in love with a man who doesn't believe in God. He didn't flinch. "I want to marry him," I added. Still nothing. Finally, he spoke. "You know what the church says." "I know. But what do you say?" I blinked. "I don't know anymore." He looked at the sky. "Faith is not supposed to be easy. If it were, we'd all be saints." Then he looked at me. "But don't confuse guilt with guidance. Guilt is loud. But the voice of God, that's a whisper." I sat with that. He didn't tell me what to do. He never did. But when I left, he said, "Whatever you choose, be honest with yourself. That's the beginning of grace." That night, I told Daniel the truth. "I want to say yes," I whispered, "but I don't know how to be your wife and God's daughter at the same time." He nodded. "I get it," he said softly. "But Claire, maybe we don't have to choose. Maybe we figure it out together." And that, I think, was the real proposal. If you've ever stood at a crossroads between love and belief, know that you're not alone. Life rarely gives us clean lines. If this story speaks to something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes storytelling is the beginning of healing.
I stopped answering Daniel's messages on a Monday. There was no dramatic goodbye, no confrontation, just silence, thick and hollow, like the space left behind after the church bell stops ringing. For the first time in months, I turned off my phone, placed it in the drawer next to my Bible, and sat on the edge of my bed. The rain outside was soft, not quite a storm, but insistent, like God was tapping at my window, trying to get in. I wasn't angry, not with Daniel, not even with myself. I was quiet. And maybe, deep down, I needed to listen to the quiet. The first day of silence was the easiest. I did what I thought a good Catholic woman should do when her soul feels lost. I prayed. I knelt by my bed, like I did when I was a child, and whispered the Our Father over and over, hoping that the rhythm would rock me back into some sense of order. But the words felt mechanical,
like reciting lines from a play I hadn't rehearsed in years. So I just stayed there, kneeling, breathing, listening. On the second day, I went to church, not for Mass, just to sit. St. Catherine's was nearly empty. A few elderly women in the back whispered rosaries. The air smelled faintly of incense and old wood, a scent that always reminded me of Christmas Eve services and warm hands folded in prayer. I sat in the third pew. That was always David's spot when he was alive. He used to say it was the perfect balance, not too close to look pious, not too far to seem distant. I looked at the crucifix above the altar and tried to make sense of the mess inside me. "God," I whispered, "what do you want me to do?" But there was no reply, just the echo of my own breath. On the third day, I saw Father Flynn. He didn't ask questions. He poured us both a cup of tea, sat across from me in his little study, and waited. Eventually, I spoke. I stopped talking to him. His eyes didn't widen. He just nodded, his old hands cradling the steaming mug. I thought the silence would bring clarity, I said almost to myself. "And has it?" he asked. I hesitated. "No, not yet." That's because silence doesn't give answers. It gives you space to hear what's already there. I let that sit for a moment. "I don't know if I can choose." "You already have, Claire," he said. "Every moment you remain in silence is a choice." That unsettled me. I thought I was postponing the choice, but perhaps I was already making it. By the fourth day, the ache began to throb. I missed Daniel. Not in the obvious way, not the way a teenage girl longs for her first crush. It was deeper, quieter, like missing a part of yourself you didn't realize had grown into you. I missed the way he'd always listen first, speak second. I missed the smell of his sweater. I missed his hand on the small of my back when we crossed the street. But more than that, I missed the way he never made me feel small for believing. He didn't understand my faith, but he respected it. He asked questions, but never mocked. And yet, that very difference now stood between us like a glass wall. Clear, visible, unbreakable. On the fifth day, I opened the letter again. The one Daniel wrote in part 4. I hadn't dared read it since our last meeting. I unfolded it slowly, like scripture. "Claire, I don't need you to change for me, but I can't pretend faith isn't a foreign language to me. What you call God, I call wonder. What you pray about, I try to live out loud. We are different, but I believe in the same things you do. Kindness, truth, mercy. I just don't believe they come from the sky. I believe they come from us." I set the letter down and felt something shatter inside, not from pain, but from understanding. Daniel wasn't trying to pull me away from God. He was trying to meet me somewhere in the middle. That night, I dreamed of David. He was standing in our childhood backyard, under the tree with the tires swing. He looked older than I remembered him, like the version of him I might have seen today. "Claire," he said softly, "what are you afraid of?" "I don't want to lose myself." He smiled. "Then don't. It's not that easy." "No, but it's that simple." Then he faded, and I woke up to the morning light creeping across the floor like a slow-moving river. On the sixth day, I wrote a prayer. I hadn't done that since I was 16. I didn't intend to. The pen just found the page, and the words followed. "Lord, I don't know how to love without disappointing someone. I don't know how to hold onto you and him at the same time. I'm scared that if I choose you, I'll always wonder. And if I choose him, I'll always regret. Please show me the path that brings peace, not just to me, but to us both. Amen." I didn't light a candle. I didn't kneel. I just folded the paper and placed it in the pocket of my coat, close to my heart. Day 7 arrived, and with it, clarity. Not in the form of a vision or a thunderbolt, but in something quieter. Stillness. I woke up, poured myself a cup of coffee, and looked out the kitchen window. The world hadn't changed, but I had. I no longer wanted silence. I wanted resolution. I wanted truth, no matter how painful. So I pulled out my phone, turned it on, and stared at Daniel's name. His last message was still there. Just 3 words. I miss you. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then, I called.
The coffee shop was quiet on weekday mornings, the way Claire remembered it from when she used to meet Daniel here. The tables were mostly empty, and the same older woman in the corner stirred her tea like she had all those months ago. Outside, the wind tugged gently at the umbrella stands, and somewhere, church bells marked the hour. Claire sat near the window, hands wrapped around a paper cup of something she hadn't tasted. Her heart thudded, but her face was calm. She had texted Daniel 2 days ago. "Would you meet me at our spot this Thursday? Morning, if you can. I need to talk." His reply was almost immediate. Anytime, just say when. And now, he was late, but only by 3 minutes. When the door opened and he stepped in, her breath caught. He hadn't changed, or maybe he had, but all she could see was the familiarity in the way he scanned the cafe, his eyes finally landing on her. He walked toward her slowly, cautiously, as if worried the movement itself might break the fragile truce between them. Claire stood. She didn't smile, and neither did he. "Hi," she said. "Hi." They sat. Daniel looked thinner, paler, but not broken. He was always so composed, but now she could tell he had wrestled with silence the same way she had. "Thank you for coming," Claire said. "I'd have waited a year if you asked." She lowered her gaze, throat tightening. She'd imagined this conversation so many times, but now that it was here, words felt like glass in her mouth. "I wasn't sure if I should," she finally said. "I know, and I didn't want to push. I just missed you." He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask for her back. That's what hurt the most. His understanding, his restraint. Claire looked out the window. The sky was pale, but blue. Her voice was soft. "These past weeks, I prayed more than I've prayed in my life. But I also stopped praying for days. I tried to find the answer in silence, in tears, in memories. I asked God if love was supposed to feel like betrayal." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "I love you." A breath left him, long, painful, but his face remained still. "And I believe in God, not as a habit, not just because I was raised that way, but because I can't look at a world without believing there's grace beneath the chaos." She looked at him. "And I know you can't believe the same. I used to think that was a wall, but now I think it's something else. Maybe a wound, maybe just a question without an answer." He swallowed. "Claire, I never wanted to change you. I knew what you believed from the start. I respected it, but I didn't know how deeply it would hurt you to love me." She nodded. "It wasn't you, it was what you represented." He flinched slightly. "You reminded me that life doesn't fit into perfect boxes, that love doesn't ask for permission from religion or reason. It just shows up, and we either carry it or we leave it behind." Daniel leaned forward, his voice low. "I don't have a faith, Claire. I probably never will, but I have you, or I did, and if you tell me right now that I should walk away forever, I'll do it." Claire looked at her hands. "I can't ask you to convert, and you'd resent me if I did. I don't want to change you, but I also can't pretend I don't feel torn every time I think about our future. How would we raise children? What would holidays look like? What would we do when life becomes unbearable and I need prayer and you need silence?" I'd sit with you through your prayers. I wouldn't pray, but I'd be there. Tears burned behind her eyes. And what about when you die, Daniel? I'll believe I'll see you again. You won't. He smiled sadly. That's your gift, Claire, not mine. But if you believe that, then maybe that's enough for both of us. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. A letter? He asked. She shook her head. It's the one you gave me. I've read it a dozen times. The line that breaks me is, I don't ask you to stop believing. I just ask if your belief can make room for love. He exhaled slowly. I meant it. Claire stood. Her chair scraped softly against the floor. I'm not still ready to answer that question, but I think someday I will be. He stood too. His eyes searched hers, but he didn't reach out. Neither did she. I'm going to take a retreat, just a few days, alone. No phone, no voices, but my own and maybe God's. When I come back, I'll know. Daniel nodded. I'll wait, as long as it takes. Her lips parted. You're a good man. He blinked fast, and she turned and walked out, the bell above the bore ringing lightly behind her.
There are moments in life that don't feel like moments at all. They feel like eternity folded into a breath. The sound of gravel under your shoes at dusk, the scent of rain on a church roof, the silence of your name being spoken in someone else's mind. For Claire, it was the soft creak of the retreat center's chapel door as she stepped inside 3 days after leaving Daniel in that cafe. The world had been hushed in those 3 days. No phone, no email, no voices but her own, and whatever answers she could hear in the wind or find in scripture. She had walked in the woods, prayed, cried, sat for hours with nothing but silence and Psalm 51. And somewhere between the stillness and the struggle, something had begun to lift. Not all of it, but enough. She returned to the city on a Monday. The sky was overcast. Not sad, just honest. Claire didn't text Daniel. Not yet. Instead, she went to the cemetery. David's grave was simple. White marble, a small cross etched beside his name. Someone had left fresh flowers. Not her, maybe her mother, maybe a stranger. She stood there for a long time, and then she spoke. David, I loved him. I still do. But it's not easy. It's not just love. It's faith, too. And guilt. And fear. And hope. She crouched, her fingers brushing the edge of the stone. Remember when we were kids and you told me God could hear the truth even when we didn't say it out loud? She smiled through the tears. I think that's what scares me most. That he already knows. That he already saw me fall in love with someone who doesn't believe. She sat on the grass, knees pulled to her chest. But I also believe God isn't afraid of our questions, or our confusion, or even our doubt. He made us, right? He knows. She looked up at the sky. It had started to drizzle, a whisper of rain, like a blessing that didn't need permission. I think grace isn't something we earn by getting it all right. I think it's what finds us when we're falling apart and still willing to love anyway. Claire met her mother that evening. Mrs. Walsh had not changed. Same cardigan, same furrowed brow, same steel in her voice when she said, I heard you were gone. Where did you go? Claire stirred her tea. I needed space. For what? To pray. To think. Mrs. Walsh raised an eyebrow. About him? Claire nodded. Her mother pursed her lips. Still? Claire didn't argue. Instead, she said softly, "Mom, when Dad died, you told me love didn't die with the person, that it became part of us. You believe that because of your faith." "Yes," Mrs. Walsh said cautiously. "I believe it too, but I also believe that maybe, just maybe, love that challenges us can still be sacred, even if it doesn't look like what we imagined." Mrs. Walsh didn't answer. She sipped her tea, hands trembling just slightly. Claire reached across the table and placed her hand over her mother's. "I'm not turning my back on God. A beat. I just think God might be bigger than our fears." They sat in silence for a long time, and then Mrs. Walsh whispered, "I just want you to be safe." Claire nodded. "Me too." That night, Claire finally called Daniel. He didn't say anything at first. Then, "You came back." She smiled into the phone. "I did." "Did you find your answer?" "Yes and no." He waited. "I can't promise that it'll be easy, and I can't pretend that I've resolved every part of this. I wouldn't believe you if you did," he said gently. "But I can tell you this, I want to walk forward, with you, even if I have to walk slower, even if I need to stop sometimes and pray while you wait. I'm not choosing between you and God. I'm choosing both, with open eyes." Daniel's voice cracked. "Claire, I'm not here to fix you or change you. I just want to love you, and I believe God can handle the rest." Weeks passed. They didn't get engaged right away. There was no dramatic kiss in the rain, no sweeping music, just conversations, meals shared, honest questions, church services Claire still attended alone, and sometimes Daniel would sit in the back, just to wait. One Sunday, she found a note folded in her coat pocket after Mass. "I don't believe in God, but I believe in the way you bow your head. And if faith is what makes you kind, I want to understand it better. I'll never kneel, but I'll stand beside you. Always." Claire closed her eyes, pressed the note to her heart. There's a moment, not loud, not grand, when you realize healing doesn't come all at once. It arrives in fragments. A smile, a breath, the first time you light a candle without crying. For Claire, that moment came one evening as she stood in her apartment kitchen, watching Daniel do the dishes. She thought about how far they'd come, how many things could have broken them, but didn't. Not because they were perfect, but because they were willing to stay, to keep loving, even when it hurt. She walked over, wrapped her arms around his waist. He paused, turned, smiled. "Everything okay?" She nodded, then whispered, "I'm home." If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet choices that shape your own life, the ones we make not in grand gestures, but in whispered prayers, difficult conversations, and the grace to begin again. Please share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that love and faith don't have to be enemies. And if you'd like more deeply human, emotionally honest stories, subscribe, leave a comment, and come back for the next journey. Sleep well, and may you find your own kind of peace tonight.